I'm really excited to be kicking off a new series. If you're here for the first time, so glad that you are here. Great day to jump in with us because we are kicking something new off, so you're kind of catching the movie at the very beginning, and glad to have you with us. I am actually glad to be here as well, and sometimes I almost have to remind myself of that, of what a privilege it is for me to get to do this, to get to be your pastor, to get to stand on this stage and to teach and to preach, and it is my honor, and there is honestly, I can honestly say, there's nowhere on a Sunday morning that I would rather be than right here with you guys. And I love getting to do what I do, especially getting to watch people. Why would I want to do anything else as a follower of Jesus than to watch people's lives change for eternity? That part is a lot of fun. And so it's really what kind of gave me the idea for this series several weeks ago of what I wanted to talk about, this idea of seeing people's lives change, but paying attention to that, because so often we don't. We lose sight of that. It's very easy to do. And for the first really 11 years of ministry for me, until we launched this church back in 2013, I really, to be real honest with you, I didn't pay a lot of attention to that. And it's embarrassing to say, but I'm just, I hear confession is good for the heart, and so I'm just going to confess. And there were many, many times where I could think of a lot of places I would rather be when a Sunday rolled around. I loved my job during the week. I loved what I got to do, working with students. But then Sundays would roll around, and I became like Mr. Critical, complain a little bit. I don't know if that probably doesn't apply to anybody here ever. But that's just kind of my experience sometimes. And I would just, a little too loud. Didn't like that music. Thought the service was a little boring, or it was a little too long, or didn't like that video they used, and it's a little hot, it's a little cold. Those are all, we just have a tendency to complain a little bit, and it's just what we do. I mean, it's kind of how we get. But the reason for that, as I was kind of reflecting back, I think the reason for that for me was because I just was only paying attention to me, in my little area, my circle, those who were close to me. That's just what I was paying attention to. I wasn't paying attention to the people around me. The idea that maybe there is somebody else here that doesn't know Jesus, or that is a little uncomfortable, or looking for people who might be a guest, or might, be a little lonely. I just would go in and I'd grab my family after I did, the stuff that I was responsible for, and we'd go in and we'd sit where we're supposed to sit. We had our spot. We had our spot. And we'd talk to the people who also had their spot around us, and we would get to talk and interact. It's the only time we saw them that week, and we'd act like we cared for them, for just a minute. And you've been there, right? And that's kind of how we would do. And honestly, it's because that kind of became my culture, because that was really sort of our church's culture a little bit. It just wasn't integrated into who we were. We just didn't talk about it a lot as a staff, to be real honest with you. It wasn't that we didn't talk about it, or there wasn't a thought for us, or that we didn't care at all. We just didn't talk about it a lot. This idea of being guest-centric and outward-focused and thinking about it, we just didn't, Sunday morning roll around, it was kind of our deal, And as a result, because, the staff didn't talk about it a whole lot, well, neither did anybody else, because we didn't talk about it with them either. And so it just wasn't a part of really, our DNA of who we really were. And as a result, here's the danger in that, we just get a little too comfortable. And comfort isn't necessarily the problem, but comfort's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Comfort can be a great thing because, it sort of breaks down some barriers and removes distractions and allows you to hear something, perhaps. But we can get so comfortable, if we're not careful, that we lose sight of what's going on around us. And that's the danger, especially as a believer. For those of us who call ourselves a follower of Jesus, it's very easy to get a little too comfortable, because ultimately it leads to this. This is really the problem. It leads to being spiritually nearsighted. And I want to talk about what I really mean by that today, but you can kind of get the idea that it's, you're just comfortable right in this area. Your circle of influence, your comfort zone. That's where we come up with that, because this is our wheelhouse, and we become nearsighted to the point that we can't see beyond our own walls. And so I want to look at a story today. It's actually one that Pastor Leroy talked about just a few weeks ago. It's probably one you're familiar with, Jesus and the woman at the well. Even if you haven't been in church, you've probably heard some reference to that. And here's the thing. It's found in John's Gospel. John's the fourth that we have of four accounts of the life of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we're going to be in John chapter 4 today. If you want to scroll there on your screen, or if you have a Bible, we don't hear a lot of pages turning in churches like this these days. But at one point you'd say that and you'd hear rustling, for a little while. And so preachers would have to kind of hang tight until all the rustling was over. So John chapter 4, and everybody goes, it's going to be on the screen, right? And you're right, it's going to be on the screen. So that's where we're going to be. This is an account of Jesus traveling with his disciples one day, and that happened a lot because that's really where he spent the majority of the time, was with just a kind of a close few. But this was actually an instance where they were traveling through a place called Samaria, a place that Jews typically tried to avoid at all costs. And Jesus actually ended up being alone in this moment, in this scene, which was one of the very few times in the New Testament that talks about Jesus being alone, other than in prayer to his heavenly Father. And so that's just kind of a little tidbit. And so he's alone. His disciples, it says, John records for us, they've gone into town to grab some food. It's the middle of the day. It's hot. They're tired. They've been walking. And so Jesus goes and he takes a rest by this well. Jacob's well is what we hear John records for us. And there happens to be a woman there, a Samaritan woman, and he strikes up a conversation with her. And so there's this interaction that John records for us. And it's really a beautiful ministry moment, because Jesus ends up sharing his love for her as far as eternity is concerned. He just wants to express that there's more to life than just this life. He shares that there's living water, that it's not just water out of this well that's going to satisfy, that it's living water that's going to take care of you, and you'll never thirst again. And of course she's like, that sounds amazing. And so at one point in their conversation, he speaks to her and he's asking her, he said, well, you need to go get your husband. And she says, well, I don't have a husband. And Jesus says, well, that's right, you sure don't, but you've had 5, and the man you're living with now, he's not your husband either. And she's like, sir, you must be a prophet. It's like, he must be, because he wasn't reading your email. This isn't some sort of tactic here. He knows you. He knows you inside and out. And she gets really excited and she wants to do something about this. Well, in this interaction, it's really actually a pretty incredible moment of Jesus sharing with her and ministering to her. And then it's at that point that his disciples return. This is where we pick up the story. This is verse 27. Just then, his disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking with a woman. Because in first century Jewish culture, for a man, especially a rabbi, to be speaking to a woman was a major issue. There were racial tensions, there were gender issues, there was a lot going on here. So they were surprised to see this their rabbi speaking with this woman. She's a Samaritan. We don't associate with them. There's these all kinds of racial tension going on, and then you're a man and you're a rabbi. You're not supposed to talk to a woman, because, and this wasn't everybody's thinking, but many Jews felt like it was that it wasn't even necessary, or that it was a waste of time to talk with a woman, even your own wife, because it was a distraction from your study of God's word. It's the way they felt. And so Jesus was always smashing through those barriers. It was wonderful to watch what Jesus would do. And so that's just like a little side note there. But then John records for us something that didn't happen. This is interesting. John says, but no one asked, he's kind of reflecting back on this story. No one asked, what do you want, or why are you talking to her? These are questions they didn't ask, notice. As if to say, John it's as if he's saying, I wish we had asked these questions. I wish we had been wiser in this moment. We were so dumb. I can't believe we didn't see what was really going on here. We walk back, we see him talking with her, and we're just surprised that he's talking to her. We don't assume that there's some kind of agenda or ministry going on here. Clearly we're surprised. We don't assume, what do you want? Which would say, if you were to say, what do you want, Jesus, it would say, I want to know what your agenda is. What can I do? Can I partner with you? I want to do your work with you. What's your agenda? And then why are you talking to her? I assume that because, instead of being surprised, even though that caught me a little off guard, I just assume you're doing the right thing because you're my teacher, you're my rabbi. And so instead I'm just going to ask what you're doing. Why is that? Why are you speaking to this Samaritan woman when typically we don't? I assume what you're doing is right, so I just want to know. It's that posture that John is looking back on and going, I wish we had been that way. But we weren't. We didn't know any better. Instead, we get all surprised. Well, the woman takes off because she's excited about what Jesus has shared with her, so much so that she leaves her water jar. She goes back to the town and to the people, and she says to them, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did." Bit of an exaggeration. But he told me all the good, the really good stuff about my life. Not really. Could this be the Messiah? Now, it's interesting because she clearly was trying to avoid the people of this town by going to fetch water in the middle of the day by herself. And now she's running back and she wants to share everything with them. Clearly, something has happened. They pick up on that. They know that something is different and their interest is piqued a little bit. And so they came too. They came out of the town and made their way toward him. And now, it helps me to kind of get like a mental image of what's going on. So let me see if I can paint just a little bit of a picture here, because this is the way I see it. There's this well, big hole in the ground, water, Jesus. There was a woman there at one point, and she's gone back into town. His disciples and Jesus are still there. They're resting. There's, some period of time has lapsed because she's gone, and left and had to get back to town and tell them. And now they're coming back, and there's maybe a little bit of excitement. Maybe a little bit of, some mumbling or some shouts of joy or, anticipation. And there's a group of people, a large group, the whole town, whatever that really means, just a large group of people coming from the town. The town came out and they wanted to see Jesus. And so they're walking up the road, and Jesus' disciples are hanging out with Jesus. And Jesus, I can just imagine, is, eager anticipation. Because he knew what he was there to do. And he also knew the content of their conversation. The one that he had with this woman. He knew that he had shared some news. And so now he sees the town coming. He's like, oh, it's about to get good. This is what I get so excited about this. This is what I'm here to do. This is my business. This is my Father's business. This is what I'm here to do. How exciting. And his disciples aren't paying any attention. So that's kind of the scene. This crowd is coming. His disciples aren't really paying attention. Instead, they look at Jesus and they say, well, meanwhile, his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." I didn't skip verses. Did you notice that? The whole town is coming out to see Jesus, and they're excited about something. Jesus is clearly excited, and his disciples are worried about lunch. They're thinking about lunch. You ever had that struggle? You're sitting in church and you're thinking, when is lunch? I mean, that's kind of what's happening here. We have gone into town and have grabbed food at McDonald's, and we have your Happy Meal. Why aren't you eating? It's like there's more to this, and they're not picking up on it. They're missing the moment. And so Jesus, because they brought up this food idea, as he often did, he said, okay, I'm going to teach for just a second. I'm going to use the whole food analogy. And so he tells them, he said, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. It's like, I've got a backpack of some crackers, like I'm good. You don't know. That's kind of what they're thinking anyway. That's what they're imagining. It's like, hold up. You know good and well we went into town to get food. And you've been hanging out here. What do you mean? What do you mean you have food that we know nothing about? Are you holding out? You got some leftover cake from last night? Like, what's going on? Like, help us out here. Jesus just wasn't concerned about it. He's saying, no, I have food to eat. I don't care that it's lunchtime. My food is actually the ministry and the work that I have. And they're coming out. And so then his disciples are talking amongst themselves because he makes this statement and they're all thinking, because John is remembering this. He's like, yeah, this is what we thought. Then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? That's the response. Instead of this idea, well, maybe Jesus is about to teach us something, they're like, did he maybe bring somebody bring him some food? Like he wasn't digging the McDonald's thing. Somebody brought him Chick-fil-A, because that's Christian food, right? Somebody brought him some Chick-fil-A. I wonder, it's just, they're clearly not picking up on it. Why? They're just missing the mark. They're staying right here. They've lost sight of what's coming. They don't know what Jesus is really up to. And so Jesus just explains, he said, no, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. That's my food. Have you ever been so excited about something or so busy doing something that you forget lunch. Anybody? Yeah, all three of us. I mean, I have, like, it just happens sometimes. And sometimes it's just, well, because I didn't have time, but other times it's just, I just get so caught up in something and so excited about something that I forget to eat. And some of you are thinking, I would never forget to eat. No, that is not my, but some of you know what I'm saying, right? It's just, I got so excited because I'm not even thinking about food. Jesus isn't worried about lunch. He's worried about eternity. That's the reality. And Jesus is trying to communicate that. He's trying to let them know, my work is more important than lunch. And that's what I'm thinking about. And you're missing the mark here, guys. So he explains to him and he says, you have this saying, or isn't it true that you say things like this, it's still 4 months until harvest? In other words, you plant a crop and then harvest is later, and you just make the assumption, Jesus is saying, that there always has to be a gap between planting and harvesting. Well, because that's what you know when it comes to the physical world. You put something in the ground and, well, I mean, there's nothing you can do but pray for rain, right? I hope God waters this and takes care of this, and then we'll harvest later. Like, that's kind of how you're thinking. And obviously, and Jesus is saying, isn't that true? That's how you guys think. And I think it's true even in situations spiritually, because you don't make the connection that a seed has been planted and that it can be harvested immediately. You have no idea what could take place. Jesus knows this, I planted a seed like 35 minutes ago, and the harvest is on the way. That's why I can't think about food. You guys, it's like, well, I got time. I've got space. I'll think about that later. Right now, I'm kind of hungry. I'm not too worried about that right now. And Jesus looks at them and says, I tell you, open your eyes. Open your eyes. Wake up. This can be translated several different ways. There's actually kind of two words that actually say kind of the same thing. Open your eyes. Open your eyes. Pick your head up. Stop looking down. He's saying to them, it's like you guys have been walking around with your eyes closed. And obviously he's not talking about physical eyes. He's talking about their spiritual eyes. The eyes that you get, that you receive when Jesus enters your life and changes your life. Those kind of eyes. And he's saying, it's like I gave you this new set of lenses to look through and you've closed them. And now you're just kind of walking around and you're more worried about lunch than anything. And I'm just telling you, that's not the way that I think. That's not my agenda. I'm excited about the harvest that's on the way. And you guys need to wake up and don't miss the moment. Don't miss this. Open your eyes. See something new. See the way that I see. Don't miss it. You see, I want you to open your eyes and look at the fields. And I can just imagine Jesus actually pointing off in the horizon. It's like they've just kind of been milling around. They are ripe for harvest. The fields are ripe for harvest. I think Jesus is saying, look, y'all just made the assumption that, we're just passing through Samaria. We don't really care for these people really anyway. And well, after all, Jesus came, and the Messiah has come for the Jews. And so salvation is for the Jews. And so obviously there's no ministry to happen here. Nothing is supposed to happen right now. Like we're just eating and, getting ready for revival tonight. There's a tent meeting tonight. And we got a fellowship supper and that thing that we got to do, at church. So we got to hurry up, Jesus. And Jesus is saying, no. There's no gap here. There's no afternoon to wait for. The harvest is coming. The fields are ripe. And there's no gap. There's no waiting. But you've closed your eyes to that. You see, the problem that you and I struggle with too, the disciples, they became more concerned with what's for lunch than who needs Jesus. Isn't that true sometimes? And the what's for lunch, you can plug anything in there that you'd like. It's just the things that keep us busy, that feel like the right things, or because, it's our needs and we're meeting those needs and we're caring for our family and we're, going to work and we're doing all the things that matter. But the problem is that we're so concerned with those things that we forget to ask the last question. Who needs Jesus? And this is not this is not, a step on toes message. This is an indictment on the church as a whole. I think this is kind of the posture of the church right now in a lot of ways. Not every individual, not every church, but so often this is the way that we lean. It's so easy to lose sight of the mission that Jesus has given us because we think that, it's for later. Like right now I'm busy. I got stuff. I got things. I don't know what, but I got stuff. The calendar's full. When's lunch? And Jesus is saying, open your eyes and see what I see. You see, they were spiritually nearsighted. And you know kind of how this feels. It's just so easy to get, go through the routine, and I go to church and I do my thing, and, we become susceptible to getting too comfortable. It's kind of about us, and we create services that are for us and ones that we like, and we forget that there's other people who really don't go to church that might not care for what we like, and so they don't want to come, and they're not comfortable, but we're not really concerned about their comfort because this is about our comfort. This is what we like, and this is the way that we do it, and so many churches have a tendency to lean into that a little too much, and it's so easy to do because there is a natural gravitational pull towards being selfish and inward. There just is. Without paying attention, every single individual in every church will drift toward being inward focused unless you are intentional about being outward focused. Does that make sense? Nobody has to practice that. We just become selfish. It's just the way that we do, and we get used to our routines. It's why you don't see some churches growing at all. It's like, well, it's not about numbers, and that's true, but it is about people. And we want to see people coming to know Jesus, which is our agenda, which was Jesus' agenda. And he's just saying, open your eyes and be reminded of what I'm here to do. But so often we get caught in this cycle of being nearsighted, and we lose focus, and we don't see. Everything out there is kind of fuzzy. I mean, if you've ever, worn glasses before and, called yourself nearsighted, you kind of know what I mean. It's like everything out there is like there, but it's really fuzzy. So it doesn't really impact me. It doesn't really influence me. Everything within, everything that I can see right here is in my field of view, and it's the most important thing to me. That's what moves me. And so that's where we stay. And ultimately, being nearsighted can lead to churches being very ineffective and unable to make a difference in people's lives, which is the danger. So what do? How do we make sure that we don't drift in this direction? I would rather us, and I said this in the first service, I would rather us default and overdo being farsighted than nearsighted. Like, I would rather run into the danger of neglecting each other, even though that's not really what I want at all. But I would rather lean in the direction of being overly farsighted. Because I think we're going to take care of each other, and we're going to bring each other along, and because we're here. But everything else that's not here is not here. And so it doesn't affect us, and we don't affect them. And Jesus is saying, I want you to be more concerned about the town than the lunch. You know what I'm saying? So how do we do that? How do we avoid it? Because I think there's a couple of things that lead to being nearsighted, and it's first of all our own needs. I mean, just paying attention to just what's going on in your own life. I mean, it's real easy to do because, well, it's happening to you, right? That's just what's happening. And you can tell a lot about this, as to whether or not you're nearsighted, as to how you pray. The content of your prayers will help you determine that. In fact, you often should ask yourself the question, if God were to answer all of my prayers right now, would it change the world or would it just change me? It's a good question. One for all of us to consider. And then there's just our own blessing. The things that are going right. When things are great, we tend to forget that it's not so great for everybody unless we are intentional about it. It's just easy to do. We forget real quickly that the rest of the world, especially being a North American Christian in the greatest country in the world with all of the greatest blessings in the world and access to all the greatest things in the world, so easy, isn't it, to remember or to forget that the rest of the world lives differently? I mean, it's easy to forget things like this, to forget that almost half of the world's population, more than 3 billion people, live on less than $2.50 a day. It's easy to forget that. It's easy to forget that 22,000 children die every day because they don't have enough food. They're just hungry. It's easy to forget because that's not our reality. It's easy to forget that a fourth of the world's population lives without electricity, something as simple as that. It's easy to forget that there are more than 40 million slaves in the world today. Slaves. People that do not know what freedom is. Not just, well, we don't live in a free country. We're talking in bondage. In all different, and a large majority of those are women and children. I mean, it's just easy to forget. That's not a guilty thing. That's just an awareness thing. It's just a reminder. It's like, oh yeah. So easy, isn't it? To get nearsighted, caught up in the everyday and the stuff that affects us and, that we need, and we just forget. We just forget. And I think if Jesus were standing here, I honestly believe this. I think if he were standing here today and he was speaking to a non-believer, I think he'd say something different. But I think if he was speaking to his church, to those of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus, I think he would look at us and say, open your eyes and see your world. If you would just open your eyes and see your world the way that I see it. If you could just see Wetumpka the way I see Wetumpka. If you could just see the people that live over there in that other part of town, if you could just see them the way that I see them, not the way you see them, the way I see them. If you could just see your colleagues and your coworkers and your boss and the people who live right around you, the people across your country, the people around the world, internationally and other countries that live completely, if you could just see them the way that I see them, what a difference that would make just by you opening your eyes and paying attention and not walking around blind and nearsighted as if the rest of the world doesn't happen. Flip the channel on the news because it bothers me a little bit. I don't want to see that today. It's like, but there is somebody who is out there and that's their reality today. There's people sitting around you right now. Do you know their needs? Are you aware of what their experience is? And so from the very beginning, when we launched this church just several years ago, I had this idea that maybe we would never become caught up in being overly nearsighted spiritually. Because I knew that was the natural tendency, because that was my personal experience, because I knew how easy it was to drift in that direction, I was thinking, and this small group of us was like, maybe we could create a place where we're so intentionally focused on being outwardly focused that we would never drift back into self. And I think we've tapped into something, but it's amazing how many days pass where it's a tension. It's this tension that's constantly happening, and it's just this suction, this gravitational pull that wants to take us in and just, it's just kind of, let's just do church. Could we just do church? Let's just enjoy being together. I just didn't want to ever get so caught up in being more concerned with a fellowship supper than leading somebody to Jesus. That was my thinking. As hard as that is sometimes. And I just wanted to see if we could maybe do that, to create a place. And I'm realistic here. Like, I know that we can't do everything. I mean, we're like in a little town and, a little community in rural Alabama and this little county. And so I get it. Like, we can't, do everything. So I know that. But I don't want to make excuses either. And so just early on, we've made a statement similar to this. We've just said, we can't do everything for everyone, but we can do something for someone. And you can write that down. I know we can't do everything for everybody, but we can do something for somebody. In other words, there is something we can do. There is a need that we can meet. We're not going to be, affecting every country on the planet right now. We're not going to be sending missionaries, to all corners of the earth. But man, there are some things that we can do, and we can do it well and effectively and it can make a huge difference. I mean, even just on Sunday mornings, what we do is very intentional, very strategic. We try to be outward focused even though we're in here together. You know, how can we reach people? It's why we, set the parking lot up the way that we do, why we advertise the way that we do, the reason that we, set up the kids hall the way that we do and create great kids experiences and welcome people, and the way that we talk to guests from the stage every single week and say some of the same things. That's not an accident. It's not because we don't have enough to say, I promise. It's intentional. We're talking to our guests because there's a guest every week, and so it's hard sometimes because we don't, it's like, well, I'm just tired of saying that. I'm not going to say that anymore. It's like, well, no. Somebody else is here that hadn't heard that before, so you might need to say it again for their sake. It's like, oh, okay, I can do that. And even outside of these walls, the way that we serve our community, the way that we partner with organizations around our country, even internationally, this little church, we're partnered in very strategic ways, knowing we can't do everything, but we can do something. So I just want to figure out, how do we keep our eyes open, like Jesus commands us and encourages us to do? How do we keep our eyes open so that we don't become so inward focused? First, I think it's just awareness. We've got to be aware. If you want to open your eyes, then we have to learn how to be aware of needs around us, to interact. Don't just close the garage door and close your blinds and live, reclusive lives. I mean, let's figure out how to be in our surroundings. It's difficult to do sometimes because that's not the direction our culture is kind of leading us, but we're countercultural as Jesus followers. And so how can we just be aware and know it? Because here's the thing, you can't reach what you don't know. And you can't love what you don't know. We have to know. We're going to have to, you can't know everything, but you can know something. Where's that point of passion for you? The thing that breaks your heart when it comes up. Fostering or adopting, or, I'll talk about some of these things over the next few weeks in those different areas, or church planting. Maybe it's world hunger. Maybe some of those statistics kind of bothered you, an orphanage somewhere. What is it? What breaks your heart? Be aware. Don't just avoid it. Be aware and then be willing to get close. Once you're aware and you find kind of that point of passion, that thing that kind of breaks your heart, and you're thinking, it's like, okay, my eyes are open now. Now get close. Here's the thing. You can't get close to everything or everybody, but you can get close to some, right? In other words, this is about building a relationship, being intentional about building a relationship, moving towards. And a lot of churches take kind of a shotgun approach, and I think this is kind of the backwards way to do it. It's like, well, let's overcompensate, and let's just, we've got lots of money and lots of resources, so let's just, like shotgun approach, we'll just give everybody a little something. And I don't know who that's for, really, because it's like, we'll take $1 million and give it, to 1 million different places, and everybody gets $1. It's like, I don't think you've made much difference, right? Who's that for, them or for you? Or what if you took, that $1 million and you broke it up 3 ways, to different organizations or missionaries or people or, things that are going on in the world that are making a real difference? How can we do that? That's the getting close part and the relationship part. And then be willing to invest big. Go big. And this means time and money. If you're going to draw close to something or someone, you know the need, you've been awakened to it, your eyes are open, you're going to have to be willing. This is the long game now. It's not just, kind of check a box sort of thing, or, a serve day for us is not just about a serve day, a once, kind of once in a while thing. For us, it's creating partnerships. It's really what we were doing this past, couple of weekends ago when we were beginning to partner with this Renew Outreach Development Center, meeting in the old junior high school. We want to come alongside them and give them the help that they need, but so that we can be in it with them. I kept telling them, I was like, okay, so y'all just understand, right? We're not just coming in here to do, just one thing. Like we're as long as y'all handle your end well, we're going to be with you for a long time. We're going to partner with you. We're going to send you volunteers. We're going to send you resources. We're going to help put on events for you. We're going to make sure that this thrives well, that it does so well. We're with you. We can do that as a church. We can do that as individuals. That's our strategic approach. I'm going to be talking about some of those, the places that we partner with over the next few weeks, so that you'll begin to see the difference that we can make right where we are. And then finally, at some point, you need to be invitational. Like, it needs to turn into an invite at some point. If it's not leading people to Jesus, then we're not doing any good. We just said that to fill tummies isn't enough. We want to fill hearts. And so if tummies is how we get there, great, we're going to feed some tummies. But at some point, we want to invite people to follow Jesus. We want people to know him. That's how we vet organizations, as a matter of fact. We want to make sure that that's their end game. There's no hidden agenda here. We want people to know Jesus. We want to take care of their felt needs, some of those physical needs, but ultimately we want to take care of eternal needs. We want to give them hope forever. So be aware, get close, invest big, and then be invitational. Open your eyes and see your world. Open your eyes and see your world. Are you willing to do that? Are we willing to do that? This isn't a church leader thing. This is a church thing. This is how we are to be the church as the body of Christ. Jesus has called us to that. He has invited us to be more concerned with leading people to Jesus than inviting people to lunch. I can promise you. Lunch might be where it starts, but it doesn't need to end there. Let's be about that. Let's open our eyes and be aware of what's going on around in the lives of the people just right around us. Know their need, and then be willing to step into their life, partner with them, and walk them to Jesus. Now, I want to invite you to do that right now. If you would, just bow your heads with me for just a second. This is how I want to close. For those of us in this room who perhaps maybe you're just kind of right on that fence, or you just, you thought church was just kind of the thing you do. I just like going to church. It just makes me feel better. Well, that's great. But maybe a decision hasn't been made for you to step into a relationship with him, because he's the one that changes everything. We sang about that a little bit ago. When he steps in, he changes it all. And he gives you those new eyes. And so I want to invite you to open those eyes that he wants to give you today. And a prayer does not save you. A prayer is simply a declaration of what you already believe in your heart. And so if that's you, right where you are, you can pray with me. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for sending Jesus, for preserving words like these and stories like these for thousands of years, so that we can be reminded that life isn't just about us. God, I know how selfish I can be. I know that I am broken, that I'm a sinner, and that I need you. I invite you into my life to be my Savior and to be my Lord. And I give you the reins. Keep my eyes open and fixed on you and your agenda. Pray that it would be glorifying to you in Jesus' name. Amen.